Welcome to the Massif Impact Show. I'm your host, Taylor Reed. With me, I've got my co-host, Nathan Fort, my other co-host, Matthew Rowley, and today we've got a special guest with us, Dan McOmber. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have you here. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. What's your day-to-day business life like?
Day-to-day, we're working at Halee Solar, and a little different spin on solar. We're building integrated, or what they call BIPV, building integrated photovoltaic, and we are looking to make a change in that solar industry and disrupt some of the history of rack-mounted solar on the residential homes. So we're looking to integrate into a home, make it more aesthetic, a better price, and a better value for the customers. As the manufacturer, we're here in the USA and proud to be here and do as much work as we possibly can here.
Awesome. How did you guys come up with this idea? I know it's been somewhat of a long road, you were telling us before. How did you get to this point where you're like, you know what, we're going to change the game of solar? Yeah,
that's a good question. So kind of a long story. Obviously, it was a collective effort between my partner Tyler and I. And so I had my history a little bit is that I had some exposure with solar. After college, I went into the finance industry and started working for a defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, for a number of years, a couple of years. And by about the third year, I was clear that I didn't want to climb the corporate ladder.
Right.
It was going to take way too long.
Yeah.
And I had aspirations of not only creating more wealth, but also making more of a difference, at least in my mind, in the world. Not just crunching numbers the rest of my life for a large defense contractor. So by the third year, I'd started my own business, which was, based on my experience that far, was a government contract business, and we did a lot of IT and services, which morphed into a satellite communications business. And so with that, we did a lot of remote work for the Air Force, built and installed small solar stations for receiving satellite signals in remote areas. And so I had some exposure to solar. And then about 2017, 2018, I sold that business and I was introduced to Tyler Lyman, my business partner and friend. And so he had a very good vision of how we could bring solar, make it better, more integrated, more aesthetic to the masses. Mm-hmm. And he was in the process, and I won't tell his story, but he was in the process of selling a business, and so was I. And it came together at the right time. And he had some experience with solar as well, and started trading ideas. And essentially, we started a couple businesses in about 2018, 2019. One was a government contracts business to fund and help build, support the solar business.
Very cool.
And so, yeah.
We were all chatting just before the show, and I was fascinated at what you guys are doing. And you kind of went quickly over something. I want to go back to it. Because when people think of solar, I know for a long time, even for me, when I think of solar, you think of those big panels on a roof, or even on some of those the ground mounts, panels. So what you guys are doing.
Exactly.
When you say building integrated, can you kind of describe how that's different for someone who may not be aware?
Absolutely.
Of what that means.
So the building integrated solar it displaces the roof. So with a residential application, it would take the place of the roof. Instead of
it's like a shingle, right?
Like a shingle, yeah. And so we've designed it in cooperation with tile manufacturers, actual concrete tile manufacturers that are prevalent in the South and Southwest. And so intentionally designed to fit into a tile roof, a concrete tile roof. And so we do raise the roof up a little bit, create some ventilation. We have a whole ventilation system that our engineers have designed, but it actually displaces the roof. So now you have a beautiful roof integrated with solar.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty sleek.
Yeah, a lot of work and a long time in the making. But So you have a ventilation that keeps it effective and efficient in the heat. Obviously, in Phoenix, where we're based, this is the test bed.
Yeah, definitely.
No better test market.
No better test market,
Right
right?
spot.
There's a reason
The hot
why
spot.
GM and other companies used to have their test beds here. They just drive their cars until they blew up, I guess, in the heat.
Yeah.
And so through this past summer, we had a lot of testing and certifications, and to make sure that our panels would last the warranty that we provide them and be efficient. So
Did you learn some things through that process? Did you guys hit some challenges and?
Yeah, it was
obstacles?
smooth sailing the whole way. No, I'm kidding. So the old saying of 2 or 3 times as long and 2 or 3 times as expensive is definitely applicable here. And so, we did. We had a lot of hurdles to get over, a lot of the testing, the design. And my background is not engineering, so luckily, Tyler was able to put together a pretty solid team, right? A very solid team of engineers and of both men and women that have helped design this. But it was not without its problems. The heat was a huge problem. There was a lot of issues with the laminate, with the encapsulate, with designing having the right mixture of everything that would be efficient and be able to provide a long-lasting product for the customer. We've got been able to jump over a lot of those hurdles. A few times we had to go backwards and jump over the hurdles again, but that's what the name of the game is. That's what you do. That's what we do.
That's how it works.
So I want to ask about those hurdles. You think about, like, in business, we show up, we go to the office, we face the hurdle, and you kind of deal with it. But a lot of times those are heavy. You bring those home with you. So I want to back up, just being me. I want to know about a time where it seems like with most people we speak with, there's that time where you just wanted to give up. You just wanted to quit. You wanted to be done. You wanted to take the easier path and just throw in the towel. Did you have that moment with Halee? And I want to hear about it. What was it like both at work and at home?
That's a wonderful question. And yes, I could probably choose any number of a half dozen or more times when I had that. It wasn't I can't say a singular moment, but absolutely. So being married and having 4 children, and at a time of life when I have kids going into college, some kids in high school, one kid in middle school, there's a lot of expense. And then,
perfect time to start a brand new business.
It's a perfect time to start,
especially a cost intensive.
Cost intensive. So, I don't know if the stars were aligned, but when you're starting a business and trying to be an entrepreneur, a lot of these times you just have to push through, right? And Tyler and I have done that numerous times where it's how do we make payroll? How do we keep this ship moving forward? How do we do all this stuff? How do we get over these hurdles that we didn't see coming? And so it's tough not to bring that home. But my wife has always said that I'm great at compartmentalizing. I think that's a backhanded compliment.
That's healthy.
I don't know
whether that's healthy or not is to be determined.
Was that a compliment?
Yeah, I was like, thank you.
I think.
So, but yeah, absolutely. It comes home sometimes and you get a little stressed out. There's times where, the toughest time is probably a financial time when we've had some of these hurdles and it costs us a lot more to test and get compliant with our product, to get UL listed or IEC certified or whatever it may be. And so, you have your HELOC maxed out, you have all your credit cards maxed out, you have everything you can leveraged. And then payroll comes and you wonder, I don't have anything more to give. I wish I had more, but you don't. And things happen. There was a specific time where we just didn't have it. This was a couple years ago, and it wasn't there. There was no money, no more to give. Couldn't get blood out of a turnip, right? And then we come in the day before payroll, and I open up the account, and there's about $8,500 in there. I think $8,200, and payroll was $8,100. And I'm like, well, where did this come from? And so I look at the explanation on the bank statement and call the bank, and they're like, oh no, that's the COVID relief or whatever. I can't remember if that was the EIDL and I had no idea it was coming in. And it came in as a personal amount for my family and I. Then I quickly transferred it over to the company account, and it covered payroll. And then we had 2 weeks to make more money, to get more money in. And so that was probably the tipping point where I was like, man, I don't have anything more to give. Financially, it's stressful. It's everything else, and then things just happen. And Tyler and I have talked about that numerous times. When your back's up against the wall and you just keep pushing, things just happen. So
I think stories like that, to me, mean so much more than the home run hits. You know, where you're backed up to the wall and
Absolutely.
you've just got to push through. I mean,
Yeah.
if quitting's not an option, you know, a lot of our clients and a lot of our viewers and listeners are business owners and entrepreneurs, and one of the visions we had for this show was to, we want to talk about the successes and the home run hits and all that. That's great, but we want this to be an opportunity for people to kind of relate to the gritty, dirty, bloody side of being a business owner as well. And I think that goes too often unappreciated. You know,
absolutely.
I just think we need to talk about it more. You know, sometimes we like to hold those things back for for whatever reason. But I just think we need to talk about it more. I think it's good for our families to hear about it.
That's true.
And so it really is inspiring to me to know that I'm not the only one getting kicked in the teeth. You know, sometimes
you're not
with
alone.
business. Like we could all get bloodied and
happens
hang
to the
out
best
and
of us.
Absolutely.
lick our wounds and get back to work. You know.
Yeah, and I've had a number of friends that have asked me, close friends that I've, shared a little bit of this with, and I don't like to disclose too much, because I don't want people to worry or doubt or anything of that nature. But the response is always, when you explain the details and how many times you've had your back up against the wall, is, wow, I don't know how you do that. I'm like, I could never do that. I'm like, yeah, it's not for you.
That's why you're not an
That's why
entrepreneur.
you're not an entrepreneur. And that's fine. There's no shame in that, right? They have a wonderful job. They provide for their families, and that's the way they're happy.
Right.
For better or for worse, again, a quote from my wife is, why aren't you satisfied? Why can't you be content? I said, well, part of it is twofold, right? I've always wanted to make a difference in the world, and I felt like I'd have to do something besides a corporate job to do that. That's just my own opinion.
Right.
And then I also felt like I could create a lot more wealth and be able to make those differences a little easier when you can facilitate that.
When you have ownership.
Yeah, when you have ownership,
it changes the game. Yeah,
It does.
I always tell people that the difference between being an entrepreneur and a wannabe entrepreneur is the entrepreneurs have the whatever it takes attitude.
Yeah.
Where your back's up
Failure's
against the
not
wall.
an option.
Yeah, it's just not an option. So you just keep going.
It's not an option.
And I've always said that too. I'm not any smarter than the next guy. I'm just willing to, bash my head against the problem longer than everybody else.
So
keep showing up.
endurance athletes always talk about that they have that moment they have to push through, but they would never get rid of that moment. It would cheapen the experience.
Mm-hmm.
It would take away from it. And so I always like to hear those stories and those moments. It's we've all been there. Every one of us sitting here has been there. And it's almost a privilege to pay that price. Not in the moment ever.
Right.
But it's
Afterwards.
almost it's almost a
badge of honor
privilege.
after the fact.
And it's what sets people apart, I think, and that's great. So what kept you going? You mentioned building wealth. I hear that. That's and I think most people know what that means, but tell me building wealth, but why? What's your why? Okay, Dan's got this wealth. What do you want to do with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the wealth, we also want to be a social impact company, right? We want to make a difference somehow in the world, and that is it's becoming more and more popular, I believe, in the world, where people don't see the big greedy corporations. Those corporations want to be positioned such that they're for profit, and there's no shame in that, but they want to make a difference. They want to help out. And so we've done that in my past businesses. We've always had a kind of an unwritten law of volunteering time, of money, of resources, of helping out, be it consulting or whatever it may be, whatever your talents are, that you could give back and share that. And so I see a lot of the people in the world that have money that can facilitate that, and they make a difference, right? And so with the money, I have a certain amount in my head that I think I could get to, and I'd be happy, and I'd be content, and I could be able to make that generational and grow that. But then after that point, there's a lot that I could do. I have a little dive into the personal life a little bit. I've lived in South America and did a LDS mission for 2 years in Brazil. Have a passion for South America. Would love to work with people down there. I realize there's a lot of problems here in the United States that I can work on as well. But that's one of my passions. And there's a couple ideas floating around in my head with a couple of my friends down there. So, yeah.
So, Dan, you mentioned that you volunteer your time and your resources where you can. That leads me to another question. Tell me about a moment where maybe at this point in your career, before Halee, where somebody needed to reach out and help you. You wouldn't have made it without their help, and you relied on the kindness and goodness of another person in order to be where you are today.
That's a good question. It's deep. So I think as most people I know, men that I know, we're fairly prideful. We like to help, but it's hard to accept help a lot of times, right?
Just don't ask
for it.
for it.
Yeah, just don't ask for it. I'll push through. I'll make it.
Yeah.
You know, financially, I think I've always been able to do that, but emotionally or spiritually, mentally, I've had some times where I've received some good help, and even now in the partnership between Tyler and I, we've had some conversations, life experiences that when we both have our backs against the wall and going through different personal experiences as well, that we can talk to each other, and I think that's important. I lean a lot on my wife, but with another man, it's to kind of understand the challenges of being a father, the challenges of working, providing, and then also trying to be, delicate and understanding, and have that other side of you when you come home. You mentioned that earlier, Matt. That how do you not bring it home, and that's sometimes tough. And so we've had some very deep conversations as partners and as friends, and helped each other through different experiences. It's I always say marriage is not for the faint of heart. It's a challenge, right?
Right.
And no one would say that more than my own wife, right? So
Maybe we should have her on here. She
Yeah,
can
we'll
tell her
next
side.
guest.
Her side of the story.
She's the one that's carrying this forward.
really? But when everything starts piling up, and you wake up at 2-3 in the morning, day after day, and you have a lack of sleep, and you're starting to think a little crazy because you can't sleep, and you can't talk to anyone about it. That's challenging. So when you have a good partner, a good friend that you can kind of open up, be vulnerable, and talk about these deep personal issues, right? And people look at successful companies, I think, and they say, "Wow, that guy or that girl, they're so lucky. They're multimillionaires or billionaires.
They must be nice."
It must be nice. The stars have just
must be
aligned
nice.
for
It
them.
must be nice.
A week ago they weren't like that. No, there's never a story like that.
Yeah,
it takes years. It
Yeah.
takes sometimes decades. Right? It's
right.
No one's an overnight success, and those challenges of waking up and in a panic attack and at 3 a.m. of trying to figure out how things are going to work out. It's nice to have someone to lean on. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's the dark side you don't see.
Yeah,
very much.
They
right?
don't, and like you said earlier, Nate, that we don't talk about it much, right? We want to talk about the home runs. We want to talk about
We want to look good.
Yeah,
we want to
look
look polished,
good. Right?
all the
exactly,
time.
right?
Want to look cleaned up,
Right. It's you don't want to have a tear running down your face or whatever, right? That might not.
Don't want
be
to
very
look.
masculine.
Yeah, you don't want to look weak.
Yeah.
Right?
Weak. Yeah, don't want to show weakness.
Take a little bit longer in the car in the driveway, right?
That's right.
Or in the garage.
We've all
before you
been
come
there.
in.
You just let the
Yeah.
eyes dry out for a minute,
Yep.
and then walk in.
Try to
with
put
a
on a happy face at home.
Yep.
Do you have some things you do, hobbies you go to kind of
Absolutely.
get your mind in a different place? Sharpen the saw. What do you do?
Yeah. Honestly, about 7 or 8 years ago, I really picked up meditation. I believe in prayer. I believe in a spiritual side of things, but I also believe in meditation, which I believe is slightly different. I started this journey of meditation and self-reflection probably 7 or 8 years ago, when I was just very unhappy, not content. Just things were tough. And so every day I have a ritual, and it's usually very early in the morning. And if I can't sleep that night, it's even earlier.
Right.
And
I guess I'm just meditating all night.
meditate.
Go from a panic attack to meditation and back to work. You're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. It's a quiet time when none of the kids are awake. The wife isn't awake, and just go into a room by myself and really reflect and have quiet and peace, and that's a ritual that I do almost every day, and that helps me get ready for the day. Helps me realize that the mind always wants to jump to the worst case scenario, that things really are not that bad. And even I sometimes run through the worst case scenario in my head, and I'm like, even if that happened, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And what are the chances of that happening?
I love that you mentioned that. I just read this great book, and it talked about how we do that. We tend to visualize sometimes very clearly kind of the worst case scenario.
Absolutely.
But what we don't tend to do, which we can actually practice ourselves into doing, is imagining yourself dealing with that worst case scenario, right? Sometimes we just envision the worst case scenario, but we don't envision our response to it.
Right.
Because you're still in the equation.
Yep.
Right. You're not just going to let that happen.
Right.
So if you kind of walk yourself through, and that's where meditation, I think, becomes a really wise habit to take on, is you can practice walking through your motions of dealing with those worst case scenarios. So then the fear's gone. Right. We're not afraid of walking downstairs because we do it so much and we have so much practice with it. So if you have practice in your mind of dealing with those things you're afraid of, then you're not afraid anymore. Right.
Exactly.
Then you can go back to sleep. Panic attack ends. Right. There we go.
Fall right back to sleep.
Right back into the cycle.
No, you're absolutely right. If you can walk through it in your mind and deal with that and say, it's not that bad, I could deal with that.
And I think that's almost better than trying to throw that thought out, right?
Because it just jumps back in.
It's going to come back. So just embrace it, run with it, and then watch yourself tackle it, like in your mind.
The whole idea of lean in, right? Lean into this, lean into life, lean into challenges, lean into your fears, and once you lean into it, you realize it's really not that scary. I was thinking of this last Christmas. My oldest was home from college, and she comes home and says, "Dad, I want to go skydiving." And I was like, "Well, I've never done that," but my wife's like, "Are you really going to go with her?" We set it up, we went, right? And going up in the plane, little fuselage, everyone packed in there like sardines. I was like, and luckily I was at the back. I was the last one to jump. I just see everyone jumping and jumping and jumping. I'm like, my turn's coming up here. This is going to be
out of a perfectly good plane.
A perfectly good plane. There was nothing wrong with it. In fact, I'm sure that pilot, was about to land, in a few minutes after I jumped out, and everything would have been safe. But, just jump out, and it's scary for a few seconds, and then you start easing into it and start enjoying it, and it's just like challenges.
I know how it was for me. I got my mom to go with me just randomly, so kind of a very similar story. But
your mom went skydiving?
She did, yeah.
With you?
Yeah, we were sitting there.
How have I not heard this story?
Yeah, we were sitting there at a family dinner, and it came up, and I said, "Mom, if you'll go, if you're serious, I'll pay. We'll go tomorrow morning." It was a Sunday night, and she said, "Okay, let's do it."
That's smart though. You're not stressing about it for days and weeks.
We went. And as soon as I made it down before she did, and as soon as we landed, her first question, she's like, "Can we go again? Is there time to go right now?" Yeah, she loved it. Was that your experience too? As soon as you landed, like, I'm on this. I want to go again. That was amazing.
I've gone twice now, and the second time was 3 months later. I haven't been since. It's been about a year since I've gone. But yeah, it was. Once you're down, you're like, well, that was enjoyable. That was fun. Let's do it again.
That's awesome. So I want to take us back to kind of your upbringing, and because you've described a lot of personal development and growth and healthy business practice and stuff. So I wonder where did it all come from, right? What was the journey like as a kid? Like, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
That's a great question. I think a lot of my growing up years have kind of helped me to be able to be personable, to enjoy people, hearing people's stories, to be a conversationalist. I love that. I love getting to know people. I was talking to Matt earlier. It's I grew up Air Force life, and so every 3 or 4 years we moved. We knew it was coming. There wasn't a doubt if it was coming. We knew it was coming, and so you were forced to learn new situations, make new friends, establish new relationships. And that was just the way it was growing up. And so, born in Montana, moved to Sacramento, then moved to Del Rio, Texas, where, that's my first.
Del Rio,
yeah.
Texas. I've been there.
Yeah, it's those were really my first memories when I was old enough, 4 or 5 to remember. And then
There's not much in Del Rio.
No, there wasn't much to remember. So no, I'm kidding. It's a beautiful place. Then we moved to San Diego, and
possible 3 listeners in Del Rio.
We
Don't
apologize
offend.
right now.
Yeah, no, it's a great place. It's a great place for hunting as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Deer and stuff. San Diego, and then New Jersey was most of my childhood, and then Colorado, and that's where my folks retired. So
All quite different places.
very different places. We did not move overseas, which was kind of uncommon for military life. 23 years my father served in the Air Force. So, and each environment was different, right? The East Coast, very different than the West Coast, and then Colorado. So, able to get a little bit more diversification, we'll say, or a little more experience from different areas of the country, different ways of life. And so, a lot of that was just adapting and learning and growing. And I think that's probably what played into, I kind of fell into that trap of checking all the boxes as I got older. Graduate high school, in the LDS religion, you serve a mission, you come back, you go to school, you get married, you have kids, you get a good corporate job to provide for your family, everyone's happy, and everyone's content, and life is bliss. That pattern or that style of life just wasn't exactly for me.
Right.
I found out through experience. I checked a lot of those boxes, but with that childhood experience of change and always adapting and meeting new people and trying to grow and develop, once I got into this corporate job of finance, working these very large defense contracts, every month on the last day of the month, I would submit the reports, and then the next day I would start all over on the first of the month. And after doing that for 2 or 3 years,
Like, how long am I going to be doing this? How long could I be doing this?
Yeah, I'm like, exactly.
How long is a career?
Yeah, exactly. How long is a career? And then, talking with my manager, and then my second line manager, actually, I made really good friends with to this day. He's now retired. But I was talking to him, and how long would it take to get to corporate level, executive level, rather? And at least 20 years. You got to put in your time. I'm like,
I'm out.
I'm out.
Sorry.
I'm out.
No.
I'm like, it was great advice. It was great information that he gave me, right?
I'm glad he was honest with you.
Yeah, he was being honest.
You were looking for life-changing advice, and you got it.
Yeah. Good or bad, right? He gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, it was November, and I was like, well, my last day is December 31st.
Really? That fast?
That fast.
Oh, good for
and,
you.
I was like, okay, well, that's not for me. And so I wanted change. I wanted to meet new people, different environments, and starting and growing and selling businesses is a way to do that.
What was the response from your inner circle, your family, friends, when you said, hey, I'm leaving this nice corporate job to launch off into the unknown? I think this will be important for people to hear. I'd really look forward to hear your answer here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The first thing that jumps to my mind is a gentleman, a good friend of the family. He was he was a young guy. He was really young. He was probably about the same age I am now.
See what you did there.
Real young. Is he as handsome as you?
Yeah, I don't remember him being quite as handsome as. No, I'm kidding. No, he was probably in his mid 40s, and I was in my late 20s, and I remember distinctly him coming to me and saying, "You have one child and one on the way. You can't afford to quit this job." And
fear.
And my fear.
Yeah.
And
Scarcity.
I don't know what was in me, or if I was offended by that or what it was, but I said, hey, his name was Joe Notch. I was like, Joe, I can't afford not to quit. And he was puzzled, right? He's like,
he's never going to understand.
What do you mean?
That.
He's like, he'd been at Lockheed Martin for 20, 30 years or whatever it was, right? And I was like, I just can't afford to stay here anymore. Like, I won't fulfill anything that I hope to fulfill in my life.
I think that is a key difference right there, is understanding the cost of mediocrity.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it goes to that scarcity mindset we talk about. If you understand the opportunity, then you can understand how expensive it is
What you're
to
giving
not
up.
chase the opportunity, right? The opportunity cost.
Absolutely.
So, and I don't know if you got to be wired a certain way to see that, or you have to have a certain, basket of experiences to get
Right.
you in that kind of mindset. But that's
And I'm
cool.
sure I would have done great. I was on this fast track at Lockheed Martin. It was young, new talent, and they were giving me promotions every 6 months, and it was okay. And I heard the term going around the company about golden handcuffs. They pay you enough to have a good life,
right.
a good life, and provide for your family and take vacations. But they're going to limit how many days you take a year, and they're going to limit how much you can make, and there's a cap on everything. But you could live a happy, great life doing that. And a lot
for
of people
some
do.
people, that's really
And
fulfilling.
That's great. Yeah. There's that need for there's all kinds of kinds, right? It takes all kinds of kinds. So it just wasn't my style. So
Yeah.
I think some people appreciate the structure too, and
absolutely.
I put reliability in quotation marks just because I learned from my experiences early on how insecure a secure job could be. With my dad was an electrical engineer. He worked for government contractors, and he was laid off as soon as he finished the job, or if the job lost its funding. And I was like, "What's this whole thing about a secure job? Like, I'm not seeing it."
No.
Salary.
Yeah,
what?
I grew up terrified of having a salary. I was scared. It's hard for me to understand how people feel so secure with.
Absolutely. Yeah, they tout loyalty to the company, but as soon as something happens,
That's a one-way street.
Yeah, it's a one-way
See ya.
street usually.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you, growing up, were you around other entrepreneurs, or were you the only one? Like, were your parents encouraging that you would go off and do your own thing? How were you raised in that mentality?
Yeah, good question. It wasn't. I had a few people around me, especially as I got into my teenage years, and I kind of sensed from my father that his father was in construction, his brother was in construction, and they did fairly well throughout the years. They had their ups and downs, as construction always does, but overall, I think they did well. And I could sense a little bit in my father that he loved the time in the Air Force. He really did. He was disappointed once he got out into the world outside of the military, of how cutthroat it was and mean. It was more of a brotherhood, he always talked about in the Air Force. But I could sense that he probably had bigger dreams of different things to do. And now that he's in close to 80, he's doing just fine. He's doing great. My mom and dad are doing great. Financially they're fine. But there wasn't the risk, or he fell into that category of, let's check these boxes, let's do this, let's provide for the family. That's what we do. We as fathers, that's his mentality. We provide for the family, and that was a solid way to do it. And so as I got into my teenage years, there were some people we lived close by and went to church with, and things that were, in my mind, very successful. And it always boiled down to they owned a business. And so bingo. Yeah. Every time I saw it, I'm like, oh, you were in banking, but you quit and you started this other job, this other business, and one gentleman did a cabinetry business and blew it out of the park, right? Yeah. At least in my mind at that time, I was like, whoa, what his house was, what he was driving and everything, and how he could help other people and his kids and everything. And it was always a story of, you quit a different job, a 9-to-5 job, and you took that risk.
Yep.
And it doesn't always pay off. It doesn't. There were other people that I know that it didn't work.
Right.
And they went back and got a corporate job. But the beauty of it is they could go back and get that corporate job and still provide for their families. But at least they took the chance.
Right. Well, and more often than not, what I see is when people do quit some job and then they go out on this really character building experience and they fail, they learn a lot from it. And more often than not, when they go back to the corporate job, they end up getting maybe even a little better one because their experience they've now had gave them a new frame of reference and new skills that they didn't have before. So
100%.
I think, our emotions and our natural kind of fear that we hold on to, that anxiety of jumping to the worst possible scenario, we really like to kind of keep ourselves in place, right? And tell ourselves that maybe it's not going to work, so I shouldn't even try.
Yeah.
But what if it does?
Yes.
You know, like we should start asking ourselves that question more. What if
I agree.
the best case scenario turned out? What if everything you ever dreamed was possible happened?
Exactly.
And so that's the thing that I try to get myself to ask is, what if it all works?
Yeah. And a lot of times it's funny how the mind works, I think, is that for some reason or another, your mind can think of the worst case scenario, but it's hard for it to think of the best case scenario.
Right.
You're like, well, like you said,
yeah.
What if this happens? What if something happens that I can't even dream of right now? Right. And how am I ever going to get there or give that opportunity, the universe or whoever, to give me this opportunity if I don't try?
And if you put yourself in a position where your growth is limited, your opportunities are limited, then you've just removed the possibility of that best case scenario. Right. So you kind of have to, you got to get out from under the pavilion, right? You got to expose yourself to the opportunities in order to reach that level. You mentioned families that you knew growing up that you were looking to. I was just wondering if you had mentors that were involved in your life during this time when you quit your job and you're looking at starting a business, and how important were those mentors?
Yeah, that I've always dreamed about that. I didn't really have a mentor. I looked and I kind of tried to source some out, and
or maybe not people you were like physically interacting with, had a relationship with.
Absolutely,
maybe
mentors
you're looking up to, and
look up to, and people that have been successful. I've had those, and so it was kind of a different kind of change in the system here, right? A lot of my family members have got corporate jobs and have done different things, and so trying to go off on my own, it was just I think it was more of it was just something deep down inside that I'm like, I look at how much I'm making per year. I'm like, X amount. I'm like, I could make that easy if I could just get off and do my own thing. So for a mentor, it was more, who did I idolize? Who did I look up to? Who were the successful men and women out there that had really taken that chance and gone for it? And I do have some of those, right? And there's a couple people, local families, as well as, everyone looks up to, like a Warren Buffett or someone that I always idolized, the people that had a lot of money and didn't show it, right? They were successful. They took the chance.
Unassuming.
Yeah, unassuming, right? These were the people I wanted to be like. I wanted to, my dream was to, have all this wealth and then be like, I'm not overpaying. I'm going to Walmart to shop, man. There's no way, There's no shame in that. That's
absolutely.
Yeah, and I really idolized those people. I didn't feel like I had to show it off. I never felt that way.
So Dan, you mentioned that our brains can come up with all these worst case scenarios, and they're not as good as creating the best case scenarios. My big question for you is: your life now better than the best case scenario you imagined when you first started as an entrepreneur?
Financially, not quite. I'll be honest, candid. I'm not quite where I want to be financially, but from a perspective of overall, absolutely, right? Sometimes I have to just pinch myself, right? And I have a beautiful wife, 4 beautiful kids, and it gets emotional, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm like, man, so undeserving, but yet, So to answer your question, to get let's let things dry out here a bit. Absolutely. So I look and I'm like, man, my kids are amazing. They're successful. They have an example of what I hope they can do, whatever they choose. But they know that they can be successful at whatever they choose to be. They see dad, and the funniest thing about my kids is for years, their whole growing up, my 2 daughters, Bella and Azure, that are in college now, they said, my friends would always ask, what does your dad do? and the response was always, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what he does. All I know is he makes money. That's what they would say. He makes money. And I would joke with them because we did do satellite communications and mainly Air Force work, government work. And so I'm like, I just want to keep you safe. I can't tell you what I do, which had nothing to do with it. It was not top secret at all.
Make it seem cooler than it was.
But it sounded really cool. Dad was being cool. I was like, oh my goodness, Dad, you can't tell me. I'm like, it's better that I don't.
That's funny. That's hilarious. My 4-year-old tells all her friends that I work on the computer. and that's all she tells them. So like other
money
parents,
just comes out of the computer.
Other parents will come up at like school function stuff. They're like, so I hear you're a computer programmer, and it's like, no, not at all, not even close.
I do use a computer.
I use a computer occasionally,
that's about where that,
but yeah,
that's funny.
So I'm getting the signal to wrap it up from our crew, but I want to ask you before we check out here, if you had to leave like one or two pieces of advice to other entrepreneurs in the world that you want them to know, and then second piece of advice, something that you want your kids to know, like if today was your last day, what would those two things be?
But I just finished being emotional here. What do you?
We're bringing it back.
We're dragging you back in.
Dragging you right back around.
So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I would probably have to say what we've been talking about this whole time. The theme here is the fear, right? And for whatever reason, I'm okay with that. In so many different aspects of life, I'm okay with the fear. I embrace that. It's scary at times, but I've been able to push through enough times that you can see what's on the other side. So for those young budding men and women out there that are starting to be entrepreneurs or have good ideas, don't be scared. Push through that fear, because on the other side is all those hopes and dreams, right? You can't get through and get to those without facing the fears.
It's like the skydiving, right? The fear is worse than the actual jump.
It absolutely is. You lean in, it's scary for a moment, and then you start having clarity, and you start seeing better things on the other side. And then that just gets you the momentum going, and you keep pushing forward. So for my kids, I guess, think about it that, hey, if your dad can do anything, you can do anything, right? They know me, and my wife knows me better than anyone else, so they know my weaknesses and everything. And I guess, that would be a hey, listen, if Dad can do it, you're a lot better than Dad. You're a lot smarter than Dad. You're a lot better looking than Dad. You have everything going for you.
Got a lot more tools.
A lot more tools, and hopefully I've been able to provide a few more tools for him.
Sure.
Than what I was given, but I was given a lot of tools too. And so, be whatever you want to be, and don't be scared. Just go for it.
Love
and
it.
They see that I've been doing this for the last 20 years, business after business, and thank heavens they've never gone hungry. They've been able to do pretty much everything they've wanted to do. Sometimes we hold back because we don't want them to feel like everything's just given to them, even if we have the means. But if they can see Dad being successful and facing his fears, then they can do the same.
Love it.
That's great.
Dan, we appreciate you having you on. That's all we have for now. Check out the Massif Impact show on wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.